Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to discuss the Fiscal Year 2018 National Defense Authorization Act. After several months of negotiations, the House and Senate Armed Services Committee have arrived at a completed conference agreement. Earlier today, we passed the NDAA for the 56th consecutive year. Let me highlight some of the important issues that we addressed in this agreement. This conference agreement authorizes a total of $692 billion, which includes $626.4 billion in base budget funding for the Department of Defense and certain security activities of the Department of Energy, and $65.8 billion in overseas contingency operations, OCO funding. And of course, we could not have done it without the cooperation of all the members of the committee, including the President, and I thank him for his contribution and his service. This includes the administration's $5.9 billion budget amendment we received earlier this month, which seeks an additional $4.7 billion in base funding to bolster missile defense and to prepare 2 Navy ships after recent collisions, as well as $1.2 billion in OCO funding for operations in Afghanistan and for additional capabilities in the Central Command area of operations. The conference agreement includes significant increases in additional resources aimed at restoring full-spectrum readiness as soon as possible across the military services. Specifically, operation and maintenance funding, widely known as the lifeblood of readiness, was increased by $1.16 billion for the Army, $277.9 million for the Navy, $82.3 million for the Marine Corps, and $1 billion for the United States Air Force. This conference agreement supports a top line of $700 billion for national defense, the 050 activities, which is roughly $150 billion over the Budget Control Act cap. If the cap is not adjusted, and if this amount is fully funded by the appropriators, then we would trigger the harmful across-the-board cuts of sequestration, just at the time when we are trying to restore readiness. I want to be clear. I agree that DoD needs additional resources, but we must address the caps for both defense and non-defense activities. I remind my colleagues that under the Budget Control Act, the BCA, national defense activities include certain programs at the FBI and the Coast Guard, while non-defense activities, the other cap, include the State Department, Veterans Care, Customs and Border Protection, and the TSA. We need to look at our nation's needs holistically, and we must remain vigilant over the amount of money DoD can effectively utilize. So the BCA has an arbitrary division between the Department of Defense and everything else. We have to look at national security, and that includes both sides and both caps. With regard to our overseas operations, the conference report authorizes the entirety of the funding requested for our efforts in Afghanistan, including $1.7 billion to invest in critical aviation capabilities, such as close air support platforms and modernized rotary wing assets, and to continue to sustain and train the existing fleet. The report also authorizes 3,500 special immigrant visas to continue to uphold our commitments to the many brave Afghans who have provided critical support to the U.S. mission in Afghanistan. In this regard, let me thank Chairman McCain and Senator Shaheen, without whose efforts this provision would not have been included, I believe, in the final conference. The conference report continues robust support for our counterterrorism efforts against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the other violent extremist groups, including approximately $1.8 billion for the training and equip programs in Iraq and Syria. Excuse me. It also fully funds the Department's budget request for the United States Special Operations Command. With this bill, we will enhance public transparency and congressional oversight of military operations and the policies that underpin them. Most notably, it requires a public articulation of the legal and policy frameworks governing the use of military force outside of declared war zones, as well as additional reporting on civilian casualty incidents and DoD efforts to prevent them. The conference report includes a requirement for the Secretary of Defense to appoint a senior official in the department to lead an effort to harness and integrate all of the department's capabilities to confront and defeat the kind of strategic influence operations that Russia conducted against us and our allies over the last 2 years. It is vital the Defense Department integrate its cyber capabilities with its information warfare experts to provide capabilities and options in time for next year's election cycle in the United States, and to support our allies in Europe against Russian operations directed against them. Additionally, the conference report includes a requirement for the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State to develop and report to Congress on a comprehensive whole-of-government strategy to counter the Russian malign influence threat. Such a detailed strategy must include measures to defend against and deter Russian activities relating to national security, including hybrid warfare, cyber attacks, and information operations. The 2018 NDAA also authorizes the Secretary of Defense to establish the Indo-Asia-Pacific Stability Initiative, which will be used to improve our posture in the Asia-Pacific region and provide additional resources to increase partner capacity and multilateral exercises in the region. The Chief of Naval Operations Force Structure Assessment for last winter identified a goal of 355 ships, including 66 attack submarines. This bill makes a good down payment on that goal by adding 5 ships to the budget, including 1 DDG-51 destroyer, 2 littoral combat ships, 1 LXR amphibious ship, and 1 expeditionary sea base. Perhaps not as dramatic, but no less important, is the addition of $698 million to the budget request to now allow the Navy to begin expanding the submarine industrial base. Achieving the CNO's force structure goal will require adding 18 attack submarines to the previous force structure goal of 48 boats. This will be no small challenge, since retirement of older submarines will exceed deliveries of new submarines during the 10-year period from 1991 to 2000. In that period, we ordered only 4 attack submarines: Connecticut, Jimmy Carter, Virginia, and Texas. And so we have to do some catching up. Providing the resources for the Navy to expand the submarine industrial base in an orderly fashion will be a critical element of efficiency and a critical element in building up our fleet. The conference fully supports the budget request for the modernization of the Triad and its nuclear command and control to ensure we can deter existential threats to our homeland. Our Triad of submarines, ICBMs, and bombers have been in service for decades and must be replaced. Secretary Ash Carter put the situation eloquently when he said that a failure to do so would, in his words, mean losing confidence in our ability to deter, which we can't afford in today's volatile security environment. In the area of technology and acquisition, I am pleased that this bill shows strong support for the Department's network of labs and test ranges, which help drive efforts to maintain our battlefield technological superiority. In particular, I think this bill makes significant strides in enabling DoD to develop and buy the modern software and IT systems that are integral to every system, platform, and business system in the Department of Defense. Additionally, it reauthorizes the Defense Experimental Program to stimulate competitive research, to expand the number of universities capable of working with the Pentagon on advanced research. This bill also pushes DoD to make use of advanced big data to manage business functions and processes. New ways of collecting, analyzing, and applying lessons of data are revolutionizing the commercial world. It is time that DoD apply these same techniques to lower costs and save money and time. The conference report also includes a provision that would allow the Army to transfer all excess firearms no longer actively issued for military service to an organic facility for the purpose of melting and repurposing. This provision not only allows the Army to divest themselves of these weapons, but it will also provide a steady stream of work to our organic foundries. These are part of our arsenal system. Furthermore, the provision will authorize the Secretary of the Army to annually designate additional excess firearms that are no longer in military use to be repurposed. This common sense approach will allow the Army to save money on storage costs, as well as repurposing these excess weapons for higher priority needs identified by the Army. I'm also pleased the conference report builds on a markup amendment by Senator Nelson and directs the Department to conduct a threat assessment and deliver a master plan for climate change adaptation. The conference report includes House language from my colleague Congressman Jim Langevin that codifies several findings related to climate change and expresses a sense of Congress that climate change is a threat to our national security. In the area of military personnel, the conference agreement accomplishes much on behalf of our service members and the Department of Defense. The bill authorizes a 2.4% across-the-board pay raise for our troops and extends authority to pay over 30 bonuses and special pays to encourage recruitment, retention, and continued service. It also includes authority for service secretaries to extend by an additional year the time that the MAVNI recruits may remain in the delayed entry program to ensure that background checks are completed so they are not unnecessarily separated due to the fault of the government. These are individuals who are here legally, but their status is a result of their joining the MAVNI program. If this program were terminated, we would lose their service to our military forces and they would be forced to leave the country. Additionally, the bill permanently extends the special survivor indemnity allowance under the Survivor Benefit Plan, which was due to expire early next year. This ensures that widows of our veterans and service members who die of service-connected causes will continue to receive their monthly benefit and authorizes annual cost of living adjustments to this benefit going forward. With regard to military family care, the report authorizes $50 million for impact aid, including $40 million in supplemental impact aid and $10 million, twice the usual amount, for military children with severe disabilities. And to a military family and to local school systems all across this country, this impact aid is absolutely essential. Furthermore, it requires the Department to improve pediatric care and related services for children of members of the military. This bill will also improve military family readiness by addressing the shortage of qualified child care workers, requiring that the realities of military life be considered in setting the operating hours of child care centers, and by increasing flexibility for families when the military requires them to move. Let me conclude by stating the obvious. The reason this bill passed was because of the extraordinary bipartisan leadership of Senator John McCain. Also, because of the extraordinary bipartisan leadership of Chairman Mac Thornberry of the House of Representatives Committee, and also Ranking Member Adam Smith. And I look forward to working with them in the future. Finally, the conference agreement would not have been possible without the hard work of the entire committee staff, who worked diligently to help finalize this agreement. I would like to thank Chris Brose, Eric Schwab, and all the Majority Committee staff for the hard work this past year. On the minority staff, I want to thank my staff director, Elizabeth King. I'd also like to thank Gary Lealing, Creighton Green, Carolyn Chuter, Maggie McNamara, Jonathan Clark, Jonathan Epstein, Jory Feldman, Oscar, Jody Bennett, Kirk McConnell, Bill Monahan, Mike Noblet, John Quirk, Ann Serapin, and John Green. Let me state the obvious, that they do the work and sometimes we get the credit, but the work is theirs. I am deeply appreciative of all these efforts. And again, let me indicate what is obvious to all our colleagues. Without the inspirational, practical, dynamic, and unrelenting leadership of Chairman McCain, we would not be at this moment today, the 56th consecutive passage of the National Defense Authorization Act. With that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.